With only 4,000 men against 40,000, Khalid had exactly one option left. He would not be able to withstand the Byzantine army's superior numbers for long. In this desperate situation, Khalid ibn al-Walid, one of the greatest generals in the history of Islam, had to make a decision that would determine the fate of the Muslim army. He knew that if he failed, the outcome would be catastrophic. The city of Ajnadin, where they were camped, was just a few miles away from the Byzantine army's main force. As al-Tabari recorded in his Tarikh, Khalid knew that the Byzantines had received reinforcements from other parts of the empire, and their total strength now exceeded 40,000 soldiers. The Muslim army, on the other hand, had only 4,000 men, including the reinforcements that had arrived from Medina. Khalid decided to split his forces into two groups. He took a third of his men and led them to the east, where they would attack the Byzantine army from behind. The remaining two-thirds of the Muslim army, led by the other commanders, would continue to fight the Byzantines in the front. As Ibn al-Athir noted in his Al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh, Khalid's plan was to create a diversion and weaken the Byzantine army's defenses. He knew that if he could create a gap in the enemy lines, his men could exploit it and gain the upper hand. The battle was intense, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. However, Khalid's plan began to pay off as the Byzantine army started to falter. The Muslim army, led by Khalid, attacked the enemy from behind, and the Byzantines were caught off guard. According to al-Tabari, the Byzantine army was caught in a pincer movement, with the Muslim army attacking them from both the front and the rear. The Byzantines were unable to withstand the double attack and began to retreat. As the Byzantine army retreated, the Muslim army pursued them, inflicting heavy casualties. The battle was a decisive victory for the Muslim army, and it marked a turning point in the history of the region. But the letter that arrived that night would change everything. It was a message from the Prophet Muhammad, instructing Khalid to lead the Muslim army to the city of Emesa, where they would face a new challenge. As the armies of the Byzantine Empire and the Arab tribes of Arabia clashed on the fields of Mu'tah, a crucial question hung in the balance. Would the meager force of 3,000 men, led by the seasoned General Abu Ubayda ibn al-Jarrah, be enough to hold off the onslaught of 40,000 Byzantine soldiers? The stakes were high, for the outcome of this battle would determine the fate of the Ummah, the global Muslim community. As Ibn al-Athir recorded, the Byzantines, in their arrogance, had underestimated the determination and martial prowess of the Arabs. Al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh, Abu Ubayda, a veteran of the Battle of Ajnadin and a trusted lieutenant of Khalid ibn al-Walid, knew that his small force would have to employ clever tactics to compensate for their numerical disadvantage. He chose to deploy his archers to soften the Byzantine lines, followed by a swift cavalry charge, designed to exploit the Byzantines' weak flanks. As the battle raged on, Abu Ubayda's strategy began to yield dividends. The Byzantines, reeling from the sudden onslaught, struggled to maintain their cohesion. Their lines began to crack, and the Arabs sensed victory within their grasp. But just as the tide of the battle seemed to be turning in their favor, disaster struck. A Byzantine counterattack, fueled by desperation and rage, threatened to cut off Abu Ubayda's forces from their supply lines. The general's scouts reported that the Byzantines had positioned a large contingent of heavy cavalry on the far flank, poised to deliver a crushing blow. According to al-Tabari, Abu Ubayda paused, weighing the risks and consequences of each possible course of action. The weight of responsibility, the lives of his men, and the fate of the Ummah all hung in the balance. But Abu Ubayda, undaunted, chose to adapt his strategy, deploying his archers to soften the Byzantine lines once more. This time, however, he added a crucial element, a contingent of lightly armored infantry stationed to flank the Byzantine cavalry. The clever tactic worked, and the Byzantines found themselves pinned down by Abu Ubaida's archers, unable to break through to his rear lines. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the Byzantines, exhausted and disheartened, fled the battlefield in disarray. Abu Ubaida's forces, buoyed by their unexpected victory, celebrated their triumph, knowing that they had secured a crucial victory for the Ummah. But the battle was far from over. As Abu Ubaida gathered his men to regroup and tend to their wounded, a letter arrived from the Caliph, Omar ibn al-Kay. With only 40,000 men against 4,000, Abu Ubaida ibn al-Jarrah had a daunting task ahead of him. As the leader of the Muslim forces in the region, he was tasked with defending the city of Palestine against the Byzantine Empire's relentless attacks. Set up the stakes were high, and the risk of failure was real. If Abu Ubaida failed to defend the city, the entire region would be lost to the Byzantines, and the Muslim forces would be pushed back to the borders of Arabia. The weight of responsibility rested heavily on his shoulders, and he knew that he had to come up with a strategy that would give him an edge over the enemy. Rising tension, Abu Ubaida knew that the Byzantines were a formidable enemy, with a well-trained army and a strong understanding of the local terrain. He needed a plan that would take into account the limited number of men at his disposal, and the fact that the Byzantines had a strong advantage in terms of numbers. According to al-Tabari, Abu Ubaida decided to set up a defensive position in Themin Valley, near the city of Gaza. He knew that the valley was a narrow and winding passage, which would make it difficult for the Byzantines to launch a full-scale attack. Crisis doubt as the Byzantines began to mass their troops. Abu Ubaida knew that he had to make a decision quickly. He couldn't afford to wait for the enemy to launch a full-scale attack, as that would give them a significant advantage. According to Ibn al-Athir, Abu Ubaida decided to launch a preemptive strike against the Byzantines, hoping to catch them off guard and gain the upper hand. However, as the Muslim forces advanced, they encountered a strong Byzantine contingent, and Abu Ubaida was forced to fight a fierce battle to hold his ground. Resolution despite being outnumbered, Abu Ubaida's forces managed to hold their ground, and the Byzantines were forced to retreat. According to Al-Tabari, the Muslim forces were able to inflict heavy casualties on the enemy, and the Byzantines were forced to abandon their plans to capture the city of Gaza. Cliffhanger ending as the Muslim forces celebrated their victory. Abu Ubaida knew that the war was far from over. The Byzantines would regroup and launch another attack, and he had to be prepared to face them again. According to Ibn al-Athir, a new Byzantine army was already marching towards the region, and Abu Ubaida knew that he had to be ready to face them. As the Prophet Muhammad's message spread across the Arabian Peninsula, a new generation of leaders emerged to carry the torch of Islam. One such individual was Abu Ubaida ibn al-Jarrah, a merchant-turned-war hero who would play a crucial role in the early conquests of Islam. With only 4,000 men at his disposal, Abu Ubaida was tasked with capturing the strategic city of al-Qaryatin, which controlled the trade routes between the eastern and western provinces of the Byzantine Empire. The stakes were high, as a failure would mean surrendering the momentum of the Islamic conquests. Al-Tabari reports that Abu Ubaida was well aware of the city's defenses, which consisted of high walls and a large garrison of Byzantine soldiers. Rather than launching a direct assault, he decided to use a clever tactic to outmaneuver the enemy. According to Ibn al-Athir, Abu Ubaida instructed his men to dig a series of trenches around the city, cutting off the Byzantines' supply lines and isolating them from the outside world. Rising tension. As the Byzantines became increasingly desperate, they launched a series of costly sorties against Abu Ubaida's forces, only to be repelled by the Muslims' superior archery. Meanwhile, the city's governor, a stubborn Byzantine named Theodoros, refused to surrender, even as his men began to desert him. According to al-Dhahabi, Theodoros was convinced that the Muslim army would eventually retreat, and he was determined to hold out until then. Crisis doubt. As the siege dragged on, Abu Ubayda began to worry that his men might lose their morale and cohesion. The Byzantines were relentless in their attacks, and the Muslims were starting to tire. According to Ibn Khaldun, Abu Ubayda called a meeting with his top commanders to discuss their strategy, only to find that some of them were advocating for a retreat. Abu Ubayda knew that such a move would play into the Byzantines' hands, and he refused to consider it. Undeterred, Abu Ubayda ordered his men to launch a decisive assault on the city walls. As the Muslims breached the gates, the Byzantines were caught off guard, and the city fell to the conquerors. According to Ibn Hisham, Abu Ubayda treated the Byzantine prisoners with kindness and mercy, earning the respect of the local population. Cliffhanger ending. As the city fell, Abu Ubayda received a message from the Prophet Muhammad himself, congratulating him on his victory and ordering him to continue the conquest of the surrounding region. But the letter that arrived that night would change everything. With only 4,000 men against 40,000, Khalid had exactly one option left: to launch a daring relief expedition to save the besieged city of Damascus. As al-Tabari recorded in his Tarikh, Khalid's forces were vastly outnumbered, and the city's fate hung in the balance. The stakes were high. If Damascus fell, the entire region would be lost to the Byzantines, and the very fabric of the Muslim community would be torn apart. Khalid knew that he had to act swiftly and with precision to save the city. According to Ibn al-Athir, Khalid chose to launch a preemptive strike against the Byzantine forces besieging Damascus, hoping to catch them off guard and disrupt their supply lines. Khalid's tactical reasoning was sound. He knew that the Byzantines were relying on their superior numbers to overwhelm the defenders of Damascus. By striking at their supply lines, Khalid aimed to weaken their grip on the city and create an opportunity for the defenders to break out. As Al-Tabari noted, Khalid's forces marched at night, using the cover of darkness to approach the Byzantine camp undetected. The crisis came when Khalid's scouts reported that the Byzantines had set up a strong defensive position near the city, with thousands of soldiers arrayed behind a wall of shields. According to Ibn al-Athir, Khalid paused, weighing his options and considering the risks of a frontal assault. But he knew that he had to act quickly, before the Byzantines could regroup and reinforce their defenses. With a deep breath, Khalid gave the order to charge. His 4,000 men swept forward, a storm of steel and fury that crashed against the Byzantine lines. The battle was fierce and intense, with both sides trading blows and neither gaining the upper hand. But Khalid's men fought with a ferocity and determination that ultimately proved too much for the Byzantines. As the sun began to set on the battlefield, the Byzantines began to falter and retreat. Khalid's men pursued them, cutting down anyone who stood in their way. The battle was won, and the city of Damascus was saved. But the relief of Damascus was only the beginning. As Khalid's men regrouped and tended to their wounded, they knew that there were still many challenges ahead. The Byzantines would not give up easily, and the road to victory would be long and hard. But for now, they could bask in the glory of their triumph, knowing that they had saved the city and secured a crucial victory for the Muslim community. With only 4,000 men against 40,000, Khalid had exactly one option left: to make a strategic retreat to the city of Fal. Rising tension. Khalid knew that his only hope for victory lay in a daring tactical move. He decided to split his forces, sending a contingent under the command of Abu Ubayda ibn al-Jarrah to march to the city of Afamia, while he himself would lead the main army in a surprise attack on the Byzantine camp. As Al-Tabari recorded, Khalid chose this strategy because he knew that the Byzantines would be expecting a frontal assault, and by splitting his forces, he could catch them off guard. Crisis doubt. According to Ibn al-Athir, as Khalid prepared to launch his attack, he received a message from Abu Ubayda, reporting that the Byzantines had detected his plan and were preparing to ambush the Muslim forces in Afamia. Khalid was faced with a difficult decision. Should he cancel the attack and regroup his forces, or should he press on, risking a catastrophic defeat? Cliffhanger ending. But the letter that arrived that night would change everything. It was a message from the Caliph Abu Bakr, ordering Khalid to immediately abandon his campaign and march to the aid of the besieged city of Bosra. What did this mean for the future of the Muslim army?